Today, on Human Rights Day, we would again like to raise the issue of the Rohingya genocide by the Myanmar government. My colleague, Senator McFedrin, for medical reasons, cannot be at this press conference. Today, I'm joined by my colleague, Senator Salma Ataullahjan, Professor John Packer of the University of Ottawa's Human Rights Center, and Mr. Farid Khan of the Rohingya Human Rights Network. They will be speaking on the terrible situation of the Rohingya in Myanmar. More than 730,000 Rohingya fled Myanmar in 2017 after a brutal military-led attack on the Muslim minority group. Les Nations Unies ont déclaré que l'attaque brutale menée par l'armée était animée d'une intention génocidaire et que des massacres et des viols ont été commis. Over a year ago, the Senate of Canada unanimously recognized the atrocities against the Rohingya as genocide. Over a year ago, the House of Commons unanimously recognized the atrocities against the Rohingya as genocide. Le gouvernement canadien a nommé M. Bobré au poste d'envoyé spécial au Canada, au Myanmar, pour faire enquête sur ces atrocités. En avril 2018, M. Ray a publié un rapport qui présentait ses conclusions et ses recommandations. Aucune mesure n'a encore été prise pour donner à ces recommandations. Last Thursday, our government very clearly stated in the throne speech that, and I quote, Canadians expect their leaders to stand up for democracy, human rights, and respect for international law. Our government further went on to state, as a coalition builder, the government will build partnerships with like-minded countries to put Canada's expertise to work on the global scale in areas like the promotion of democracy and human rights. Today we stand here and we ask Prime Minister Trudeau and Minister Champagne to act on the throne speech and immediately work with like-minded government of the Gambia, who has courageously stood up for the Rohingya of Myanmar and has referred the matter to the International Court of Justice. In November, the Gambia filed a lawsuit accusing the Myanmar government of genocide against a Muslim minority. This week, legal arguments on the Rohingya genocide begin. We stand here and ask you, Prime Minister Trudeau, to please utilize Canada's great expertise on the International Court of Justice. Now is the time to implement words so articulately set out in the throne speech. Please join the Gambia, who will be asking the International Criminal Court of Justice to immediately impose provisional measures to protect the Rohingya before the full hearing. I'm very pleased that yesterday Canada, along with the Netherlands, welcomed Gambia's application against the International Criminal Court of Justice. But I would like to remind our Prime Minister and Minister Champagne that they have an obligation under Article 9 of the Genocide Convention to bring up this case. As you set out in the throne speech, Canadians expect our Prime Minister to stand up for the Rohingya in Myanmar. We, at this time, ask you to act. I will now ask Senator Ataullahjan to address us.
Thank you, Senator Jaffer. Senator Jaffer so eloquently said what needs to be done, so I'm not going to repeat that. We have, this issue has been going on since early 2011, 2012. I've been speaking on this since 2012 in the Parliament with the Burmese delegation, where there was no interest to even hear about what was happening with the Rohingya. it was as though the Rohingya did not exist. I brought it up in Dhaka with the foreign minister, Bangladesh foreign minister, and there was a recognition that something needs to be done for the Rohingya. Well, we are hearing of stories of young girls being trafficked. We are hearing of children being denied their right to an education. And I would like the Canadian government to stand up and speak on behalf of the Rohingya. We in Canada were known for our stance on human rights and speaking on behalf of minorities and speaking on the rights of people and the rights of children. So I would really like, Prime Minister Trudeau and the Foreign Minister to stand up and say something. The world looks at us, quite often when I'm at international conferences, I will have some of the parliamentarians come to us and say, we need to learn from Canada about human rights. So I think the time to stand up and be a leader on the human rights in the world is now, and we really, really need the Prime Minister to say something. I applaud the government of the Gambia to stand up and take the stance, and I know there's a lot of support for them. But in Canada, we need to hear our leadership say something. That's all I'm going to say, and it's an issue that I continue to watch and engage with when I ever travel overseas, whether it's with the Bangladesh government or other governments, and I will continue to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jaffer, Senator Ataullahjan, for being here today and adding your voices to this ongoing issue. Yesterday, December 9th, was International Day of Commemoration for the Victims of Genocide. Today, December 10th, is Human Rights Day. These 2 days commemorate the anniversaries of the groundbreaking UN Genocide Convention and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which are 71 years old. We are here to commemorate those days during a week when the International Court of Justice in The Hague will hear an application from the West African nation of Gambia to file charges against Myanmar under the Genocide Convention for atrocities committed against the Rohingya under the leadership of disgraced Nobel laureate Aung San Suu Kyi. The Rohingya Human Rights Network has been calling for the Genocide Convention to be invoked against Myanmar since early 2018. This landmark treaty, which was the first to be drafted and ratified by the United Nations after World War II, is the only mechanism available that can hold a state accountable for the crimes it committed and the only tool that provides mechanisms for restitution for the victims of genocide. However, when we began our campaign to invoke the Genocide Convention, it was not Gambia, but rather the Government of Canada that we were asking to file a case at the ICJ. After the atrocities came to light in September 2017, Canada showed leadership on the world stage by being one of the first nations to condemn the atrocities, by appointing a special envoy to explore options to help the Rohingya, by committing $300 million in humanitarian aid for Rohingya refugees, by raising the Rohingya crisis at international forums like the G7 Summit and others, and by passing 2 unanimously supported resolutions in Parliament, in the House of Commons and Senate, last year, which recognized that genocide was committed, becoming the first nation to officially recognize that a crime had been committed against the Rohingya. For more than a year, Canada provided hope to the Rohingya that justice would be done, and we were hopeful that Canada would be leading the effort. But that's where Canada's leadership on the international stage seemed to stop, and where Rohingya hopes, frankly, were dashed. Despite more than a year and a half of lobbying the government, despite repeated calls by our organization and other human rights voices to invoke the Genocide Convention, Canada failed to act. 1/3 of the Senate, more than 125 human rights and civil society organizations, and MPs from all parties signed letters to the Prime Minister and Foreign Affairs Minister calling on Canada to file a genocide case at the International Court of Justice in The Hague. But the government seemed deaf to those calls. Our organization held a multitude of media conferences on Parliament Hill since 2018 and organized events across the country in every major city, calling on the government to take action at the ICJ, but we seemed to be ignored. Even a petition that was delivered to the government with more than 45,000 signatures at the time, calling on the government to invoke the Genocide Convention, was ignored by the government. Today, that petition has more than 77,000 signatures. For the last 4 years, both the Prime Minister and former Foreign Affairs Minister Chrystia Freeland have repeated the phrase, "Canada is a rule of law nation," and claimed that Canada lives up to its international treaty obligations. Well, that doesn't seem to be the case. because the Canadian government did neither when it came to taking action to stop the Rohingya genocide and seek legal sanctions under the Genocide Convention. Essentially, after giving hope to the Rohingya, Canada failed them by not acting. For more than 18 months, the Canadian government has refused to live up to its treaty obligations under the Genocide Convention by filing a case at the ICJ against Myanmar, despite admitting that the crime of genocide has been committed by Myanmar. Instead, it's the West African nation of Gambia that has shown leadership. It has picked up the cause of seeking justice for the Rohingya at the ICJ, where Canada has apparently refused. Through its actions, it has shown that it is now the leader on the international stage on the Rohingya crisis that Canada apparently isn't. Today, Rohingya have traveled to The Hague from around the world to say thank you to Gambia and to show solidarity for taking on the genocide case against Myanmar, and to stand in defiance of Myanmar leader Aung San Suu Kyi, who will defend her nation's actions before the ICJ. Rohingya are in The Hague to show her and the world that they will not be silenced, they will not be intimidated or forgotten, despite the horrors and atrocities that have been inflicted on them by the Myanmar government recently and over the past 4 decades. To quote Hafsar Tamisuddin, a young Rohingya woman I met in The Hague in June of this year, "You may have tried in every possible way to erase our existence, but we exist, and we will continue to strive and exist in honor of our people who have been murdered and who have lost everything. Our souls shall never rest until what has been taken away from us will be given back to us with dignity and respect." There are also Rohingya Canadians who will be in that crowd in front of The Hague today and for the rest of this week. They are there to send a signal to the Prime Minister of Canada that if Canada wants to be a rule of law nation and defender of human rights, as he and Chrysler Freeland have so often stated, then they should take lessons from Gambia, which is living up to its legal responsibilities under the Genocide Convention and defending the human rights of the Rohingya. Where Canada has offered slogans with no actions behind words, Gambia is offering a real hope for justice for the Rohingya. However, Canada does have a path to redemption. If the Prime Minister wants to show that Canada truly is a defender of the rules-based international order and human rights, then we ask him to instruct Canadian officials to have Canada become a party to Gambia's genocide filing. We and all those who have been lobbying the government to stop genocide in Myanmar, which continues today, still would like to see Canada participate in the genocide case and put its legal expertise and international weight behind this prosecution in a very substantive way. Because frankly, words are cheap, and we've heard too many words on this issue followed by too little action. It's actions that matter, especially when it comes to helping those Rohingya who have survived genocide and those who continue to be subjected to it in Myanmar today. Sitting on the sidelines is not an option when it comes to human rights. Canada needs to show leadership and join Gambia in prosecuting the Rohingya genocide at the ICJ. If the Prime Minister truly wants Canada to be a leader on the international stage, then now is the moment to act and show it and demonstrate Canadian leadership in a case where justice for survivors of genocide is the goal. Thank you.
My name is John Packer. I'm a professor of law and director of the Human Rights Research and Education Center at the University of Ottawa. It's my pleasure to join today 2 senators and thank Senator Jaffer for the initiative and my friend and colleague, Mr. Khan, on the Rohingya Human Rights Network. Today is a special day, but an odd day. It's the 71st anniversary of the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, coming one day after the adoption of the Genocide Convention on the 9th of December 1948. It's also now in 2019 the 25th anniversary of the Rwanda genocide, which took place in the spring of 1994. The impetus for these, for the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the Genocide Convention as foundational instruments of a new world order after the Second World War, the adoption of these 2 instruments was the Holocaust and World War, which for the second time in the beginning of the last century had constituted such a scourge. The cornerstone of the global rules-based order is the normative foundation of human rights. It is the basis for civilized human relations and for sustainable peace and development. Yet today, we witness a case proceeding at the International Court of Justice in The Hague of yet another genocide, due to the initiative and the courage of Gambia, which has acted under its obligations under the Genocide Convention to bring that case and to hold responsible the government of Myanmar. This is an unprecedented case at the International Court of Justice insofar as the applicant, the Gambia, is not a directly injured state and is acting solely on a general public interest against genocide, which is a peremptory prohibited norm of international law. There are 152 states parties to the Genocide Convention, including Canada, any of which states could have brought the case, yet only one has. Today is also odd because of the breathtaking appearance of a Nobel Peace Prize laureate, Aung San Suu Kyi, to personally defend or to lead the defense of Myanmar against the genocide allegations. She is doing so as a head of government, the state councillor, and as the foreign minister of her country. But she is representing all parts of the government, all forces and agents, and all persons in Myanmar who are responsible for the commission of these acts, of which there is abundant evidence. The court will finally determine the exact breaches of the Genocide Convention, of which Gambia contends violations of almost every obligation in the Convention, to prevent, not to commit, and to punish genocide. Irrespective of the eventual judgment, there is no doubt that there has been widespread, gross and systematic, and ongoing violations of the full panoply of not only the human rights corpus, but specifically of the Genocide Convention. In this light, all efforts need to be made now to identify and condemn such violations. As a result of these violations of what has been described as a slow-burning genocide, now fully 85% of all Rohingya have fled their homeland. Canada must not hesitate to act. It must join actively the international litigation. Unless and until wrongdoers know that their conduct is unacceptable, there will be no change in their conduct. The case today at the International Court of Justice is important, but it is not enough. The Rohingya have a right to live with dignity in their homeland. Today, Canada must act to pursue this end, to the rightful return of the Rohingya to their homeland in dignity, freedom, and full protection. And it may take the first step by joining the action at the International Court of Justice. It is especially important that Canada do so, not to leave Gambia standing alone or on behalf of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, which represents an association of preponderant Muslim populated states. The paradigm that this is a Muslim versus Buddhist litigation is not one which is conducive to sustainable peace and security either for the Rohingya or for the region in the long term. Canada's participation will distinguish not only Canada in the pursuit of justice for the Rohingya, but will uphold the rules-based international order and make clear that this is not an initiative of particular interest, but of general interest. I call upon, finally, Canada to stand up and to act beyond the enunciation of words at the International Court of Justice. Thank you.
Questions, David? Mr. Khan, why do you think the government is
I don't know. They haven't told that to us. The government took leadership, as I mentioned initially, and we were very hopeful after the two resolutions were passed in 2018 in both the House of Commons and Senate, that after recognizing the genocide, after being the first country to do so, that they would then follow up on their responsibilities under the Genocide Convention and file a court at the ICJ. Canada has no huge interests in the region of the world. I mean, look at Gambia. Neither does Gambia, and they're filing the case. But Canada has, legal resources and a preponderance of weight at the international level that Gambia doesn't have. So why they're not involved, I don't know. I would love to ask the Prime Minister or the staff that have been advising him on this as to why that's the case, because to actually move forward and participate in this enhances Canada's reputation internationally. And as we know, Canada is seeking a seat at the Security Council. If Canada had gone forward with a case at the ICJ, it would have enhanced its reputation. In fact, countries would have actually come to Canada's support in their application to sit on the Security Council. So I think by not doing this, by not pursuing the case at the ICJ, Canada has in fact damaged its efforts at the UN, and the leadership that Canada has seen with around the world by different nations has been diminished somewhat by Canada not following through on actions following such a good start.
Any other countries looking to party with Gambia, or is that realistic? And why haven't we perhaps seen a country with a little bit more political heft join in?
Yes, well, I was in The Hague with Professor Packer back in June for a conference, and a member of the Dutch Parliament actually pushed this issue within the Parliament of the Netherlands. And a few weeks later, there was actually a vote taken, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the Netherlands foreign minister was instructed to find ways to support a case at the ICJ. Now, yesterday, Global Affairs put out a media statement that Canada and the Netherlands, support the efforts of Gambia at the ICJ. However, there was nothing substantive behind that support, and we're saying that Canada needs to put substantive support behind the words. Canada's support of the Gambia case and its participation with Gambia can make this case so much stronger, and that's what we're calling for.
And just one last question to both of the senators. I believe it was Mr. Khan who said talk is cheap. Did Canada miss an incredible opportunity here, and how so?
I believe that Canada missed an opportunity, but I also believe that we have to move on. So my challenge to the Prime Minister is, he just said in the throne speech that you were going to look at human rights and democracy and play a leading role in international affairs. So yes, they did not take an earlier step, but this week Gambia is asking for provisional measures, and what I'm saying is for the full hearing. We don't have a choice. Canada must be there if the throne words mean anything. We have to walk the talk.
I agree with Senator Jaffer. We did miss an opportunity. And if you look at my statements and my questions in the Senate, I consistently asked the leadership in the Senate, that's the government leadership, to stand up and say something and take action. And I did have a motion, and I remember the parliamentary secretaries then just being more concerned whether I was asking to have Aung Suu Kyi stripped of her citizenship. And I said, no, that doesn't mean anything anymore, because the genocide is ongoing and continuing, and it still continues to this day. So it's still not too late. We can stand up and regain our place as we did. It was a position that Canada held which had so much respect throughout the world that we always spoke on behalf of the human rights of minorities. And it's not too late. We can still stand up and be counted as a leader. So I'm hoping that the Prime Minister or those who advise him will take a look at this and stand up and be counted. Canada needs to be in a position of leadership where human rights are concerned.